Hello, welcome to First Look. I'm in a different park today, and I have coffee, which I think is going to be an absolute disaster. I think what's going to happen is I'm going to, just right there, I'm going to spill it all over myself on my hand, and then it's just going to be like a hot mess. But it's too warm today and too sunny not to be outside. It was a crime to not do this. So I decided to give it a shot. And I like Highland Park a lot for different reasons. I like the little area up there that is near the water, and then I like this little playground over here. But I'm gonna go to the place where I'm hoping I bother the least amount of people. I think it's a completely added effect. Like, it's part of the experience for you to see what is Ben's hair gonna do throughout this entire experience. Like, do we have to really watch his hair lift up like that, like the whole time? Maybe you do, I don't know. Like, I guess you'll figure it out, which is nice. All right, what are we actually, the other thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna see if, since I don't have a piece of paper or a Bible on me, I texted myself the passage, and I'm gonna try to read it off of my watch while I'm talking to you, which I think is gonna be very awkward and potentially funny for you, which is really all the reason I do this. I do this for you. This is for your enjoyment, amusement. You need someone to laugh at, and it might as well be me. So, we're moving through this post-Easter Day series, and we've moved into having trouble, is what I've been calling it. And this past week, it was having trouble growing, where I kind of looked at a passage that we've looked at several times about the vine and the branches, and looked at what does it mean for us to grow, and trying to take a really accountable look at where I have not grown, or where I need to continue to try to grow. And so if you didn't get a chance to experience that worship service, then I encourage you to do so. But what I've liked about this about this series, I like anything where we intentionally get the opportunity to have real conversations about what faith is like. You know, I'm walking around in the world today, people who are trying to get a little exercise, people who are just trying to do some stuff with their kids, people who are doing a little bit of both, moving throughout their day. Some of them are carefree today, and some of them are carrying, all sorts of cares. And I like the thought, I guess, of making sure that faith continues to be something where isn't limited to certain spaces or places in our minds or in our days or in our weeks, but that really we come away with a sense of purpose. I'm in a tunnel now. I'll be out of the tunnel in a second. I don't know. I think for as many times in our day that just kind of feel like very ordinary and not that interesting and have-tos, I think if I can look at certain parts of that day as sacred and be kind of thinking through something that feels sacred in that moment, then that's, I don't know, I think it just reminds me to see it all around me wherever I can. So having trouble seeing, believing, following, growing. This is just having trouble loving. And which is kind of, it feels like kind of a capstone to all of this, where it kind of covers all of the other ones in some way, shape, or form. And I'm interested to see where it takes us, because I looked at the passage real quick, but I haven't read it all the way through really thoroughly. This is the part where I try to awkwardly read the Bible from my watch. Are you ready? This is John 15, 9 through 15, or maybe 17. Look it up in you'll know where we stop in your Bible. And it kind of, so it's the natural pivot from where we just were in the first part of chapter 15, which was the vine and the branches, and then it moves over to this discussion. So you really need to have that language in the back of your mind as you're about to read this. That's important. So let me see if I can do this. You ready? This is going to be great. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Of course, my phone switches off, so that's going to be awkward. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments. Isn't this fun? And abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down his life for his friends. One second. See? This is fun. We're having fun. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to go and to bear fruit. Fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another. All right, we did the awkward thing. So, what came to mind when I was reading that, besides how absolutely ridiculous I am, is I was thinking of the Star Words. Do you remember when we were at Epiphany, we did the Star Words? Well, the Star Words are like one word that you kind of take with you to kind of, to help guide you. It's a little bit like the Magi being led by a star. Well, Star Words are supposed to be kind of a word that you hang on to as you're kind of thinking about life, and we choose them out of a hat, or out of a basket. You don't choose your own. You kind of let the basket choose for you, so to speak. So you might get a word like wisdom, or acceptance, or compassion, or grace, or someone I like got dance. Someone else I know got, I think it was obedience, either obey or obedience. And they weren't sure about that. They thought that was kind of, that felt like a struggle. And it makes sense why it would feel like a struggle, because that's a loaded word, right? Obedience, or to obey, has a very like kind of authoritarian way of being understood, and it doesn't feel very freeing. It doesn't feel very empowering. And so when we hear things like obey my commandments, it can feel like that too. And I thought that was a really interesting thing, because I just couldn't help but think about that as I was reading the passage. Because that word, obey, kind of comes through a couple of times. But the idea here is that there's something if then about the text, where you're obeying these commandments and then doing what they say. But another way of thinking about it is that the idea of obeying in this context really isn't about being able to adhere to something, as much as it's kind of an encouragement to have these commands of God's be something that enriches your life. So what I mean by that is, what if instead of saying, obey my commandments, we said, be empowered by, be influenced by, let my commandments be a resource to you? Because realistically, that's what we're talking about. Obeying in the purest sense, the least problematic sense, is not about this sort of total dominance of something, where someone is trying to prove that they're stronger than you, and so you have to listen to them in order to to stay safe or whatever. That's obviously not the actual idea behind what it means to obey God or to obey commandments. It's really about allowing those commandments to be a guide, to be like a starward, and to give you the tools that you need in order to live well, to love well, and to reflect God's love in the world. In the same way that, so for instance, if you think about the commandments, like love your neighbor, or watch what you say, or don't steal. Let's take that for an example. We don't steal and we don't murder for good reasons. We're obeying that command, but in reality, we're allowing that command to empower us to care for the people around us well, by considering their needs, considering their life, considering their property, considering them as people. That seems like a pretty easy one. Not coveting, let's take that one. Not coveting means respecting not only what you have, being grateful for what you have, but also, respecting and caring about the fact that someone else has something that they care about, and that you're happy for them, that they have things in their lives that fulfill them, and you would want them to do the same and feel the same for you, and so you live your life accordingly. Honoring your mother and father, there's a mutuality to that. It's not just about you listening to what your parents have to say, but in the most ideal setting, they are people who have poured themselves into you, and you're doing the same. There's a mutuality to that kind of experience. So the whole idea of the obeying piece is about empowering you to love well, giving you the tools, the encouragement, the resources to do that. So I think that's a good place to start. And then we have to get to the actual, what does it mean to love well part, right? Having trouble loving. Well, there are several ways that you and I have trouble loving. And a lot of them I think we've kind of covered in different sermons, or maybe even over the last several weeks, where we have trouble loving in the sense that who to love, right? What does it mean for me to love someone, especially when maybe the way they think, the way they act, the way they live is counter to what I value? How do I love someone when who they are is very different than me? Either, socially, ethnically, politically, geographically, however that might turn out. It's how we end up with all of the, racism and sexism and all the other isms that we deal with on a regular basis. That part, actively working on how we become people who are anti-racist, how we become people who, are able to call out and work against bigotry in the world in whatever forms it takes, who are willing to advocate for the poor, for the oppressed, who are willing to have thoughtful conversations about war and conflict and systems of power. Like those are all ways that we figure out who to love. The hard part, the second hard part, because that's huge. If we could figure that part out, if we could figure out just how to be nice to everybody, we'd be light years away from where we are now. But the other element to that, having trouble loving, is I think even if we agree, we should all love that person right there, which is a big step, because I don't always want to. I don't always know who they are. I don't know how to get to know them. There's a gap between me and them. That's a huge chasm to kind of deal with. But there's another step to that I think is equally as not only important, but equally as hard, which is, how do I love them? Meaning, what I think of as loving them may not be how they experience loving. And that's a more active kind of work, because I can decide in my head, I need to put down old biases. I need to put down old ways of thinking. The way I used to think about that group or that person or those folks over there, whatever it happens to be, that's something that I think you do. That's a state of mind, right? You have to be able to think about the world differently and make a decision to do it, right? The next step of that, though, is just because you want to love them well doesn't mean they're going to receive that love the way you intended it. Meaning, you have to actively participate in figuring out what it is that they need so that they actually experience the love that you're trying to show them. A good example might be, like a really simple local kind of example might be your children, okay, or your nieces and nephews, young people in your life. So there are probably people that you have in your life who that you love dearly, but one of them is like this and the other one is like this. Maybe one is an extreme introvert, the other one is an extreme extrovert. One of them is really into X and the other one is into Y. Like I said, people's siblings are like that, people's children are like that, people, whatever. Parents are like that. You know, how do I love that person the way that they need to be loved? And we used to talk about love languages. That used to be a thing that I think was a little bit more popular. Now we talk about more like Enneagrams. You know, if you've heard of that, if you've used like, which is basically like a way of categorizing the way that people think and process information and experience the world and that kind of thing, how they react to the world. So there's, or a Myers-Briggs test. You know, there's just different models that we've used to kind of decipher how do people experience the world and how do they, you know, figure it out and how do they interact with it. Well, you probably have people in your life that are all very different in terms of that, and trying to navigate how do I love them, what do I do for them, is really tricky. Because I think what we want is, well, I just want people to accept the version of the gift that I'm willing to give them and just be grateful for it. I'm going to try to care for one child the same I care for the other child, and they should just be grateful for that. That's not really the way it works. You know, that's not really the way that life actually is. So part of our response for how to do this well is to try to understand what it takes to love well. And that takes a lot of engagement. It takes a lot of conversations. It takes a lot of learning. It doesn't always happen naturally. And it takes your willingness to be able to be vulnerable enough to say that whatever your natural inclination is in terms of caring for someone or loving them may need to change in order for you to have the effect that you're hoping for. And you know, when I think about that from a relationship standpoint, that takes one kind of engagement. If I think about it from a church standpoint, then that's a whole other type of engagement. I had a meeting this morning where we were going over Vacation Bible School curriculum. And so I was looking at, you know, all the ways that we're going to be connecting with the kids. You know, there's different stations. You've got science, and you've got Bible story, and you've got crafts, and you've got snacks, and you've got active games, and there's music in there, and you know, there's all that. And there's a theme, and there's different whatever, all the you know, the things you kind of know about Vacation Bible School. Well, all of that doesn't really matter. I mean, it sort of sets the framework for how you do it. But it doesn't really matter as much, because it's the connections that you're going to make with people, with the kids that are there, recognizing what helps them feel safe and what helps them feel cared for, you know, because they all deal with different stuff. You know, it's not one size fits all, you know. And I think that far too often the church has kind of treated its young people especially like a one size fits all kind of experience. And, you know, the last couple of years, especially post-pandemic, that I've really been confronted with is how really personalized our children and youth ministry needs to be in order to be any kind of effective. Because all of those kids, all of those youth have completely different experiences when it comes to what their home life is like, any kind of traumatic thing that's gone into their few years on this planet, the things that make them feel safe and like allow them to have joy. All those things are very, very unique, and it takes not painting everyone with the same brush, and that's a big key to loving people, is using what we have and really making sure that we're paying attention to what people need, what they need just for them. So that's kind of a way for me to start. That's kind of where my head is as we begin this thought experiment of how we love people differently. And I hope that gets your brain kind of moving a little bit. I hope you get a chance to, or I hope you've had a chance to enjoy the weather today. Thank you for coming along with this silly little ride with me in the park. Thanks for being you, and have a good one. And I'll see you next time for another First Look. All right, take care.